Hey everyone! So I wanted to do a little follow-up on this because I kind of feel like we left it hanging in the last video. And also we do still want to take this out and drive it. But if you didn't see that last video, I'm going to leave a link up here somewhere and also in the description. You can go and check that out and get a little more backstory on what we're doing here and also the issues that we're having now. But we're going to be going in and cleaning out that fuel system, see if we can get this thing going again. And then we're going to have a look at that oil pressure to see if it really has dropped down that low or if it's just the sensor not reading right anymore. So I'm hoping that it is just the oil pressure sensor right down there that is faulty and we still have some kind of oil pressure. Because if we do, we can take this thing down and carry on with our testing, because I really didn't get to try out all the things that I wanted to see if this thing was working before we take it somewhere. But before we do any of that, we're going to have to get this thing going again. So let's just go ahead and start with the fuel tank, get that all drained and cleaned out to make sure we don't have any more issues in there. And we might also want to take the carburetor apart and just make sure that's all clean and good on the inside. So it's a pretty simple setup I have here, just one line running up to the engine and a breather up here in the corner and just 4 bolts holding this thing down on some rubber mounts. And so the tank isn't full, but there is some in there, so maybe I can turn this up like that so I don't have to empty the whole thing out right here in the truck. This we can just get off. Let's just hope that it's not over half full. Ah, okay, cool. Okay, there's a good bit in there. Found a mostly clean tray here, so let's see what's in this other than fuel. Huh. So it stopped the flow for a moment there, but there's still fuel in there. So there is something blocking that outlet now and then. Now look at that. The flow is slowing down, but there's still fuel in here. There's just a tiny bit of debris. Can't really see it on camera, but other than that, the fuel itself looks alright. But something keeps clogging up this port when I try to pour out the last bit in here. I don't know if you'll be able to see, but there is like a big sponge inside this tank. Oh no, here we go again. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get some light. Right, so what I was saying is there's like a big sponge in here. See if this camera will pick it up. There you go. You can see that huge sponge material that's at the bottom there. I'm pretty sure that is in there to minimize splashing inside the tank, but now I'm thinking that might be what is holding on to some dirt. So I think I'm just going to try and get that thing out of there, but there's no way I'm going to get it out through this little hole, so I'm just going to unbolt this whole collar right here. All right, now that gave me a much bigger hole. So hopefully I can crumble that thing up and bring it out. Yeah, it is just like a sponge. Come on. Look at that thing. Alright, give you a closer look here. So it's not pretty. It's kind of corroded at the bottom. So I'm thinking it's had some water or moisture sitting in it while it's been parked for a long time, this truck here. But if you look at those big ports down there, that little bit of dirt that's on the inside here, that is not enough to clog up those holes. So honestly, what I'm thinking has happened is that this whole sponge has probably gotten sucked down towards those holes, and with the tiny little bit of dirt down there, this has been able to hold all that together and clog up that exit port. So this is not going back in. I get the idea, it's just not working. So yeah, I think I'm gonna take a brush and try to clean this thing up on the inside, make it look a little better. Just go ahead and flush it out as well, and we'll put this stuff back together and see if that really wasn't just our issue. So after this first little washout here, I noticed something a little unusual in here. I'm going to see if I can film it. Look at all that gel-like substance that is left in there. So I'm not 100% sure, but I think this is a byproduct of how much ethanol we have in our fuel here when it's been left to sit for a good while. You can also see it down here. If that big old sponge in there was completely packed with that and then moved up against those inlet or outlet ports, that is definitely what's been clogging up this tank. So after seeing all that goo inside the tank, I've washed it out again and I'm leaving it to dry. And while it's drying, I want to take apart the carburetor on this. Because if there's been all that snot inside the tank for a good long time, it's definitely been in the carburetor as well. So let's just take this apart, see how it looks on the inside, clean it out, and then we can try to get all this stuff back together and see how much of a difference it made. This whole box on the top here, that really is the original air filter box that I sort of hacked up and modified to make it work with my snorkel over here. It's a little hard to make a waterproof intake for an old carburetor like this, so this was just the quick and easy solution. It does give me a little bit more to disassemble to get into the carburetor, however, but it would have done that no matter how I made a waterproof intake. I didn't go and waterproof the rest of the engine, so it'll still probably die if we drive into some deep water, because we're going to get water into the ignition system and all that stuff, so it's going to stop running, but this was just to prevent it from completely destroying itself, as we're not going to get water into the cylinders, so we're not going to be bending rods and all that good stuff. I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to just take this top half off, and I don't have to unbolt the whole thing from the intake manifold, because that means I can leave all my throttle linkages and choke cables and all that stuff on here. I have to see if I can avoid dropping these bolts and washers down inside of it. That would be a little annoying. Haha. Yeah, it's pretty dirty in there as well. Float and the stop valve here seems to be all good. accelerator pump is good. It's really just the dirt in here that's concerning me a little bit. So I think I'm just going to take these nozzles out here and just blow through them with some air. Make sure it's all nice and clean in there. And then I'm just going to clean up this bowl here as well. And other than that, it really doesn't look that bad in here. Well, I guess some of it is just discoloring on the inside here, but it is looking more clean now. Don't want to lose that. Yep, seems to work just right. So while I have my compressor going down here, I do just want to blow out this hose running back to the tank, just to make sure we don't have something hidden in there. Seems we have plenty of hole through that. So I'm pretty happy with my carburetor for now, so just gonna go ahead and throw all my intake stuff back on here. Alright, so now this part should be all good, but I guess we'll see. Suppose we could do with a little bit of sweeping back here. Get this box back in here. What's in the box? Well, nothing right now. Doesn't feel like this needs to be tightened up too badly. It does have little plastic washers on the balls. Right, so before putting my hoses back on, having just seen that there was some dirt in the carburetor, I'm thinking I should probably go in and replace my little filter in here. And also, some of you have mentioned that I should have a filter before the pump as well. And I agree, that would be a good idea. Reason I have a filter up here is because these do originally have a little fuel filter mounted over here where this bracket has been cut off. So the line just runs from the pump over to that little filter and into the carb. But that thing was completely gone, so I just put this little inline filter on here. And also, it's just nice to have a little see-through filter so you can easily tell if you are even pumping any fuel up here. Now, the main filter was, as I mentioned in the previous video, that was mounted underneath, but I don't really want it down there with the stuff that we're going to be going into. So I want to put it in this corner back here, just because I have some unused space here, and I think I have just the thing for that. I have this thing. This was for an Opal, I think, but ended up never being used, so this has just been sitting on my shelf for a really long time, and I think it'll work out really nicely here, because we can go ahead and clamp that right to these. Well, this was the seat mount, but we can clamp it down here somewhere and just run the line straight through it. I think that'll work out pretty well. Oh yeah. Now, just got to run our hose up to this. Oh yeah. And we just got to run it back here. I'm still gonna double clamp it back here because it's kind of a homebrew fitting, so there's no collar on it. All we need now is just a new filter up here and we should be ready to go. You see how offset that is in there? Looks like it's falling apart on the inside, so this is probably not a bad idea. I should probably put this back on as well. Alright, so finally I am pretty happy with how the whole fuel system on this thing is looking. This should all work just fine. So let's just go ahead and get some fuel in here and try it out. Right, that should be plenty to get us going. Now, let's see if we can get it up here. It was a little bit in the hose already. All right, let's try it out. All right, there we go. Running pretty nice and smooth. Well, not really smooth. It's still running with the choke on. I don't even think we need it. Helped a little bit. But my oil pressure is still pretty low. It's next to nothing. But it honestly doesn't sound like it's lacking oil pressure, and it doesn't really show signs of it, so I think it might just be that sensor. But now that it's running, we can go ahead and check it out. Alright, well, I just wanted to drive it up here so I was a little closer to my workshop and didn't have to walk so far. And lo and behold, that was enough to fix my oil pressure. So yeah, I'm pretty sure the pressure is there. This is going to be an issue either with the gauge or with the sensor. So I'm not terribly concerned with this. Oil pressure is not something that's going to come and go. So I also have this little light up here that will glow if we lose pressure completely. So even if this fails again, it's not going to be completely unmonitored. So honestly, I'm not bothered to do anything more with that. That is good enough for this car. So you know what? I'm thinking we're just going to take this thing down there and play around some more and see if we can keep our fuel supply now when we're going up and down some hills. So as usual, it's really difficult to show just how steep these things are on camera. But this is just very steep. I can hardly walk up here. You have about 45 degrees angle here, and it's pretty much vertical right here, and then 45 again here. The only two vehicles that have made it up here is this UAZ and my big Unimog. But now I'm thinking, can I go the other way across this hole? Because it's pretty much a vertical meter up right here. I don't know if it'll do it, but let's just give it a try. Man, this thing is wild. I didn't really think it was gonna make it up there, but once we cleared that bumper, it just wasn't even an issue. I don't even think I needed all that much throttle. All right, let's just keep going. So this here is where I drove down the last time and sort of just bonked right into the ground, because this last bit about that is also just a vertical drop off. I haven't really gone that way before, so I wasn't really sure what was gonna happen. But it also didn't seem to mind that, so now I'm wondering if I can go the other way, come down here and drive back up there. Man, once again, I doubted it, but this thing just did it. Now this time I did need the throttle though, but that was pretty wild. That felt good. All right, let's carry on, find something even more challenging. So I have this little flex track up here. You can't really see it because it's so overgrown, but it has offset holes that just get progressively worse as you go down here. We've brought some of my vehicles through here, but since then, my buddy has been digging it out a little bit more, and it's to the point where it's become just too extreme. Some of these holes are so offset that something is just going to roll over. But now I'm thinking, if ever there was any of my vehicles we should test it out with, it's gonna be that one. Oh man, it actually did it. I did not think it was gonna make it through those holes. This little thing is really impressing me right now. That was really fun. But I do think this is the most challenging obstacle that I have out here, so I guess I just don't have anything that's gonna stop this. So I completely forgot that. I haven't even tried to see if my winch still works. Now, to test out a winch, we should at least try to get stuck, and this is where I usually get stuck. This is where I've been getting the Unimox stuck several times. It doesn't look like a whole lot. You just drive down here into this hole and back up onto this pile. But this clay down here is just really soft, and you sink in pretty quickly once you've gone back and forth here a few times. But I will say it has been really dry out here for a long time, so I'm not sure that it is all that soft, but let's just give it a try. Nope, well that's not muddy at all, so that was not even a challenge. Like I said, it has been dry for a while, but I do have a little bit of mud in this hole over here, but going through here is just too easy. So let's try this other way down there and up this pretty steep bank right here. I still don't think it's gonna be much of a problem though. Nope, there is just not enough mud out here to bother this thing, so let's just try it. It works. Cool. Now let's go and recreate that ending shot that I couldn't do the last time. Okay, so that concludes my testing, at least for now, because it seems I really don't have anything that can challenge this. It doesn't really matter what I do, it's just gonna go right over it, and it's just conquered all the bigger holes that I have out here. But I have been thinking, I do have a lot of unused areas in between all this stuff, and now that I have that thing, I could actually go ahead and make a real track out here, like do a full circuit that will crisscross this whole lot and do all kinds of obstacles along that in just different difficulties, make some easy stuff and make some really hard stuff. Not only would it be really fun to just have a circuit I could go around here whenever I want, but also it would be much easier to benchmark some of all these vehicles against each other if they were taking the same path around this every time. Now that is going to take a little bit of planning, and also before I do that much digging, I'm going to have to service that thing, but it's just an idea that I've been playing with recently. But it seems we did get the fuel issue sorted on this thing. It's running just fine now. Well, maybe not fine, but well enough for this thing. And I'm pretty sure the main problem was that big sponge that was inside the tank. That thing was just way too fine and able to hold on to dirt, and it could move around in there, so it was able to move up and block the ports inside the tank. And honestly, that's just a matter of poor design. I'm sure you could do it that way to limit the splashing in the tank, but if you want something like that inside the tank, you should have some kind of mesh or grid around the ports in the tank so it can't move up against those and block it. But as I've also mentioned in the previous video, it is just a cheap made in China tank that I have in this. Actually, I should probably just elaborate a little bit more on that, because there's a reason that this thing is so full of cheap parts and homemade stuff and all that. Because back when we started out with this project, we really set out to build this as cheaply as we could. Firstly, because we just never seemed to have any money, but also it became sort of a challenge in itself to see if we could build this on a really low budget and still make something that was really good and capable, or at least capable enough that it could compete with some of the other trucks out there. And so far it seems to have worked out pretty well. So we really haven't bought all that many parts for this. We bought the tires, and even though they are very aggressive threads that look like the Cymex tires, these are just cheap remolds that we bought for this thing. And then I bought a few other things like that fuel tank and some other stuff, but a lot of the other parts on here are either the original parts that have just been modified, or they are things that have been salvaged from our previous racer, like the winch out there and the seats and harnesses and all that stuff. And well, even that salvaged winch, despite being a really big and powerful winch, that was also just a really cheap one from a Dragon winch in Poland. But a lot of the other parts is just custom stuff, and also parts from completely different vehicles that have just been salvaged and used for this, such as these massive bumpers. That is tie rods from big trucks. This one is from a Scania, and the rear one is from a Volvo, so a little bit of Scandinavia on this thing. And also these wheels, they were from a Suzuki, and I just cut out some beadlock rings and welded all that stuff together myself, so even that didn't cost much of anything. And there's a lot of other parts on here that are just homemade or in other ways modified stuff from something else. Now the only thing that we really spent a little bit of money on for this thing was the extra gears that we put, or the lower gears that we put in the transfer case. And also we put some upgraded axle shafts in the rear and a locker. And all that stuff would normally be really expensive parts, but this was from a company in Russia called Ish Techno, and they make some really good stuff at some really good prices. I think we paid less than $1,000 for all that stuff combined. And so far it's working out great. And I just gotta say that, even though we didn't know it at the time of starting out, it does seem that the UAZ really was the ideal starting point for this kind of budget build, because they really seem to be the most capable off-roaders for the least amount of money. And what I mean by that is, you could go and find things that are cheaper, but they generally won't be able to do what these things can do in just their stock form. And you could also find things that are more capable, but they are going to be a lot more expensive. not only to buy, but also in terms of parts and accessories and all that stuff. All right, people, we can talk a little bit more about this some other time, but it is getting dark out here, so I'm gonna end this video. But let me know what you think of this thing. And also, what do you think about building a track down here? If you have some suggestions for that, I'd love to hear them. Thank you all for watching along, and we'll see you in the next one.